and Britt, welcome to Women's Circle.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hi, thanks for having me too.
You are so welcome. It is such a pleasure to have you both on at once. Our first podcast with a double guest spot. And I guess the reason, I've said in the bio, why I think it's so important to have both of your voices on together is because you've shared a pretty unique journey yourselves into motherhood on your own, but also together. So I was wondering if we could start a little bit about, maybe Britt, if we start with you, about how you've come into being a nurse specifically in Nicu, and then the impact that that's had on your journey into motherhood.
So I guess I kind of always knew that I wanted to work with babies to some extent. So I did midwifery and did a few years there, and then I always knew that I wanted to try out the nursery and see, kind of how it was. Went down to the nursery just for a rotation and loved it, and so I've stayed there ever since. And I feel like that's where I'm meant to be. Like, I just enjoy going to work and being involved in the journeys that the women and the babies have. And then I became a mum, and it's a whole different journey on its own. I think when I was at work and I was pregnant with my first daughter, Audrey, I remember being at work and thinking, oh, like, I've got this. I look after babies all the time. Like, we're good. And then you have your own, and it's very different because, like, your emotions are mixed in with it. Like at work, I can easily, because I'm outside of the situation, I can assess it and make a rational decision. But when it's your own child, it's very different. You've got so many emotions mixed in, and you kind of, it's harder to make decisions, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point, and I'd love to get into that a bit deeper later about how, it's such a different experience just because you've worked with children and babies.
Yeah, definitely.
You don't necessarily got it when you
know
your own. So that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Ellie, what's been your story into becoming a NICU nurse?
I originally started off in women's health and never had really any passion to work with babies. I just sort of saw the job and thought, oh, I'll give it a try. A new challenge for me. And I started off in the special care unit and enjoyed it, but I knew that the intensive care was hopefully going to be where I wanted to stay. I'm very much an intensivist. I love the action, the adrenaline, not knowing what's going to happen, and wanting to help those very sick, vulnerable babies, as well as helping the parents understand what's happening and hopefully take their baby home at the end of their very long journey. And so that's where I ended up probably 7 years ago, I think it has been now, and I've been there ever since.
And so for both of you, I'd love to know because nursing's a pretty, you're essentially a caregiver, right? Like there's a nurture within you. Is that something that you both naturally always had? Like, I'm interested in looking at how you came to that kind of career choice. Britt, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's always something that I've kind of had. Like, I remember even growing up, if anyone ever had a baby, I was the first one there to kind of be there and, get it toys or, do those kinds of things. And I definitely do think I'm a very kind of caring, giving person. And that's just my personality. Yeah.
What about you, Ellie?
I'm very much the same as Britt. I, as a child growing up and as teenage years, was always that first person wanting to hold that baby, give the baby the bottle, change the baby's nappy, anything to do with the baby. I was there ready to go. And I very much enjoyed as well always making sure my friends came first before me. So I knew from very early that I wanted to be a nurse, and that was my career path. And yeah, so I'm very glad I chose it.
And did you, let's talk a little bit about your friendship, like how you guys came to know each other on this journey before you even became mothers. Who would like to share that?
Okay, I'll go. So we obviously met through work. So I didn't know Ellie at all until she came into the nursery, and I was already in special care at that point. And like initially, like we were obviously friends initially, but we went through like a transition program at work, you know, like a lot of extra learning and stuff. And I think through that we kind of developed a really close group of us. And then obviously we had kids around the same time, and that's kind of really when things kind of started to get closer, I think. And you know, like we've done mums groups together and all that kind of stuff, and since then it's just grown really.
I would love to know a bit more about going through pregnancy together. Like that's a pretty unique experience. Ellie, do you
Yeah.
Can you remember? I mean, it was so long ago. And not just one, two babies that you've gone on the journey with together.
Yes. So Brit and I have, Brit has 2 girls and I have 2 boys. Audrey is Brit's oldest, and she is 3 months older than my oldest, who is Frankie. So we went through our first journey together at work. I think I was always asking Brit a million questions because I knew she was white. Then I was my morning sickness to her morning sickness and how big each other were, because we didn't know what we were having. So we compared each other's bumps and our symptoms. And it was just nice to have that person so close in the pregnancy journey going on it with you. So you had that support. And then, we had our 2 oldest, and then we did it all again with our second. So my second son, Sully, he is 6 weeks older than Brit's second daughter, Adeline.
Wow.
Also close.
And like it's almost like bizarre. Like, is it because you were like working in the same environment? Like, you know how women's cycles tend to sync when they're working together? It's just, I think it's really interesting. And what I really like about your story is that you both seem to be really natural mothers. And you might say, no, we're not. But, you know, I work with a lot of women, and I wouldn't say that it feels that way with everybody. And so I'd love to know more. We spoke in the beginning, Brit, about how you thought you had it, you know, when you were pregnant. You're like, I work in NICU with babies, I'm seeing the worst of the worst all the time, this is going to be a breeze. So what actually, can you step us through like the reality of at what point did you realize that it's just such a different experience when it's your own?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think, you know, I think some women find motherhood very natural, and some kind of really struggle with that initial transition period. And we see that a lot at work, you know, like we see mums in those initial days, and, you know, some really just smooth into it, and others kind of really struggle emotionally with, you know, adapting to their new life. I think so. Obviously, like we were so excited when we had my daughter, and you know, I feel like those initial couple of days is all a bit kind of a blur, but I do feel like things just kind of naturally slotted in as they were supposed to. And then I remember coming home with her, and I think it was about, you know, day 4, day 5. So, you know, hormones were at a peak. But I came home and she was breastfeeding, and my milk had come in, and we were all good. And then she had a breastfeed, and then she just had this huge vomit. And I'm like, oh, okay, like she hasn't done this before. And then 10 minutes later, vomit again. And so then I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, something's wrong here. And I remember I rang my mum, and I was like crying, and I'm like, I think something's wrong. Like, we've just come home. And she's like, no, it's all good. You know, you're fine. And then in the end, you know, it was all just because she was just adapting to getting that extra milk in, because my milk had just come in. But And, if I was at work, I would have said the exact same thing to any new mum that I was looking after. But when it's your own child, you question every single thing that happens or that you do, because I guess you're just more aware of the consequences, or, you just want to protect them as best that you can. So you never want to do anything that's going to harm them.
Would you
So,
say,
yeah, I think that was...
I was just going to say, would you say that the knowledge that you have, is it a hindrance or a help?
Look, it definitely swings both ways. I think when I was pregnant, working in the nursery, like every step of the way, I was like, we just need to get to this point, and then we just need to get to this point. And, in my head, I was constantly assessing, at each point kind of where we would be. And, like I remember being at work and, being 30 weeks pregnant, and I'm looking after a baby in front of me that's, 29, 30 weeks pregnant. So that's a real mind game, because, like that's what your baby would look like inside. And yeah, I think you're definitely more aware of the complications that you can face. And I think that, it's hard to kind of turn that part of your brain off. Like I know, a lot of my friends are like, oh, we're going for the 20-week scan, we'll find out the gender, blah, blah, blah. But in my head, I was like, okay, they're going to look at the cardiac system. They're going to look at, they're going to check for all these things, and, what could they detect, or, so I think you definitely do worry knowing a lot more about it all.
Yeah. What about you, Ellie? Your journey to motherhood, smooth, not smooth? We've had a bit of a mix on the podcast so far. Like most people have had a bit of a rough landing. So it's also nice to see, it's just nice to hear that everyone's experience is really different.
I would say mine was fairly smooth as well. I had a terrible pregnancy. I was sick from probably 3 weeks until vomiting until the day I had both boys. So that was really rough. But once they had arrived, yes, very smooth sailing. We had a few hiccups here and there, but nothing that I was too overly concerned for. But again, I had Brit there on my beck and call, and I'd be messaging her at 2 a.m. in the morning while we're both feeding our babies, wondering how our day was and if this was normal and what we should be doing. So it was like I had my own personal midwife on call. But no, I can't say that I was prepared for the journey we were going into, and nothing surprised me along the way. So I definitely agree with Britt saying that working in the nursery for me is a hindrance, because I compared and was very paranoid the whole pregnancy along the way. In intensive care, we have 23 weekers. So I'd be looking after a 23 weeker that's 500 grams while I'm 23 weeks pregnant. I had numerous times where parents would ask you, oh, and how many weeks are you? And you'd tell them, and they're like, oh, I never got to that stage. Or I remember one mother was due on the same date I was due. And so she was always comparing me to what she would have been, which is hard. You have to distance yourself from that and don't become emotionally attached to those families. They do become attached to you because I think they try and go on your journey with you, because every time you'd see them at the hospital, they'd ask how you're going and what your symptoms are and what your scans are like. So that was hard, but having that insight of the Nicu and what can happen to your babies was terrifying, but also having the nursing skills as a neonatal nurse was very helpful once the baby was out. I don't think I stressed as much as I thought I was going to, but there was still a lot of stress.
Yeah. On that, comparisonitis, whatever the term is, what do you like? What's your kind of advice? You've been through it yourselves. you're seeing it right there in front of you while you're pregnant. Like, how do you distance from comparing yourself to somebody else, especially in pregnancy and then in motherhood? Like, do you have any tips or tricks?
I definitely think I know, like, we've just had our second daughter a year ago, and so our first daughter, Audrey, she was like crawling at 6 months, walking at 9 months, like she was really on the go. And I kind of, that was then my expectation of what would happen the next time. And then we had our second daughter, Adeline, and her personality is just so different. She's so more laid back than what Audrey was. So then it came to 6 months and she wasn't crawling. And I was like, oh, hang on, what's happening here? And then, like, she didn't crawl until like 9 months. And so for 3 months, I was constantly in my head going, okay, well, like Audrey would have been crawling by now. Like, what's the go? And so even in myself, I was comparing my own journeys, and I think that was hard. And I really kind of had to focus on, everyone's different, and she's got there in the end, and she's fine walking, running, everything's fine. But I think it's very hard, like everyone says, oh, don't compare journeys and stuff. But I think that's just what you instantly do. And it's like a real mind game of trying to overcome that. And just reassure within yourself that that things are fine, and that everyone just has their own journey, I guess.
Yeah. What about you, Ellie? What you said, that was a bit of a thing for you when you were pregnant. So
Yeah.
So did you compare? Like, did you find yourself comparing yourself to Brit as well?
Yeah, I think Brit and I was always look at each other and go, and who's having the girl or who's having the boy. But I think because we were such close friends, it was never a competition, or we were so supportive of each other, which, I think that's made our friendship so strong from that. And then going through the journey twice together. But as Britt said, like, she was comparing Audrey and Adeline very much. Frankie, my first, he was a very slow flower to develop. He his own pace. The pediatrician even told me I had a lazy child. But
labels. No labels though.
Yeah, now he doesn't stop. And Sully was the opposite. He was crawling at 4 months and he's been walking since 10 months. So I sort of had the opposite, where I was thinking, oh, well, if he takes 10 months to sit up, then that's what it is. But then he's, sitting up at 3 months. But Frankie was talking very young, and Sully still doesn't really say much at all.
Yeah.
But I just learned in the very beginning, I thought it's two totally different journeys for both the children, and not to compare them. And then I guess as well, you see yourself comparing them to your friends' children and the stages they're at. But I think from also working in the nursery, we always tell parents not to compare their baby to the baby next to them in the bed, even though they could be the same gestation. Babies develop at totally different rates than one another. And just to take every day as it comes, because for them, they might have 3 good days and then they'll have a week of terrible days, whereas the baby next to them might have 3 weeks of great days and then have a terrible week. So they all go on their own journeys, and I think that's what I learnt from working in the Nicu. And I was prepared knowing that the boys wouldn't be having the same journey together, and not to compare the boys to Brit's kids as well, because we were always doing so much together. But yeah, we would always chat. Brit and I would say, oh, is Frankie doing this? Is Audrey doing this? And if they weren't, we'd give each other tips on what to look for, what's to come.
What's really interesting, like some of the study I've been doing, like, of self recently, has kind of led me to this realization that there's a lot of us that may still be children when we have children.
Yeah.
And I certainly was. I've had, I'm learning to parent myself, but I wonder, because, you know, you both have spoken about finding the transition pretty easy, do you feel like you were like really in self, like that you were adult when you had this child? Because you also have chosen to stay home a lot with your children. And that is not always what people do. So I'd be interested to know, like, your perspective. Like, do you feel like you were adult when you had this child?
Look, I certainly do. I feel like, you know, I've always been very kind of mature, and very kind of sensible. So I feel like, I feel like once I had Audrey, it was like, okay, I'm responsible for you now. And that's just kind of the role that I've taken on. Although I'm 30 in like 3 weeks, and I said to my husband, I feel like when you're 30, it's like legit, like you have to have everything sorted. Like, you know, when you're in your 20s, it's like, oh yeah, it's fine. And now I'm like, okay, I'm in my 30s now. He's like, don't be silly.
I'm mid-30s, and are you
I
definitely?
know. I think 30 just sounds so much more legit to me than like in your 20s. But anyway, so I feel like I've always been mature, and I feel like that kind of certainly helped with the transition as well. Like, I mean, our lifestyle was not, neither me nor my husband were big party animals, or, you know, we didn't go out a lot or anything like that. So really, like, our lifestyle didn't really change a lot either. And I think probably that helped. You know, I've had friends that, you know, really went out all the time for dinner and drinks and stuff, and then they expect that the baby will just fit in with that when they have a baby, and it just doesn't happen. And so then I think it's that huge life adjustment as well that kind of makes it so much harder to make that transition. So I feel like I was ready in my life to have kids, and I feel like that helped.
And I think what the really, you know, awesome thing that you just said was that I had her, and then I was like, right, I'm responsible for this child. Like, literally made that conscious and understanding. And that would be very different to my journey, and probably very different to a lot of other people who just have the baby and probably haven't really learnt to be in self and be adult. There's a lot of triggering that happens with the baby, because you're like, well, like, how am I meant to look after this when I'm trying to look after myself? I think that's been a big learning for me. What about you, Ellie? Does it, because you're both young, you're both pretty in 20s. Oh, you're 31. Okay, sorry, 31.
Years ago. No, I feel like I have always been very maternal, and always knew that I was going to have kids by a certain age, and knew that by 30 I wanted to at least have 2 children. Again, my husband and I aren't big partiers. We used to go out and enjoy a dinner out together, and we'd go out and see shows and all that sort of stuff, but not going out clubbing on the weekends. We couldn't think of anything worse to do. It wasn't a huge adjustment for us. And I too think, and I knew as well, that when I had children, they were my responsibility, and being a mother was my main role then as well. So motherhood came as my priority over going back to work. And I don't know if that was because my mum was always at home with us as children. She didn't go back to work after having us. And so I always had her around the house. So that's what I grew up thinking as a mother you do. You're always at home for your children. So I have never had a problem being at home with them. I love being at home with them, and I miss them so much when I go to work, or even if I go to the shops and leave them at home. I feel naked without them around me. So yeah, I have to say that I love my motherhood journey, and if I could have 50 other kids, I would.
I think that's so refreshing. Honestly, like, it's so nice to hear, because there are so many women like you, but it's nice to have your voice here to say, I really love this journey. And like fully recognizing that it's not easy.
No, not at all. It's not easy, and it's not, and I don't look at mothers that are struggling in this journey and think, oh, why can't you do it? Because yeah, definitely it is not an easy journey. Some people just slot right into the role, and others need a bit more guidance and support, and then they eventually get there. So
what do you both do? Like, how important is self-care to you? Like, if motherhood is first and you absolutely love the journey, how is self-care even a word that we say? Like, you know, how do you find you in amongst this role?
Yeah, look, that's tricky. I think, you know, look, I mean, I currently have like 3 massage vouchers in my wallet that I need to use. And it's not even, sometimes it's not even about finding time as such, but more like I almost, sometimes I almost feel guilty just being like, you know, leaving the girls with someone else. It's like, I think because I've taken on so much responsibility to look after them, I feel like that's my priority and that's what I should be doing. And so I'm terrible at making time to be like, okay, this is what I'm doing, because my focus is normally always about, okay, well, you know, what are the girls doing? How are we going to manage the girls? You know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I feel like that's really not a good, I'm not good at that, put it that way. But I do, more recently I have gotten into like baking a lot, and so, you know, like I enjoy that, and it's something that I kind of do, you know, on the side. And I think that's been really good for me because, you know, like I'll put the girls to bed and then spend a couple of hours doing something, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of doing that for people. So I feel like that's been really good. That's been something that's kind of given me some me time back.
And your cakes look amazing. The link in so that people can come to you. I'm ordering one for Ziggy for his birthday for sure. But yeah, so you actually have found time
yeah
yourself, even if you don't see it, but maybe just in
that
kind of
moment. And I guess, you know, like I used to really enjoy getting massages and, you know, going at pedicures and whatever, but I guess things just change, you know, like that's, you know, I kind of would rather be at home doing something with the girls than, you know, going. But, you know, on the flip side, I see that it's important because, you know, I can't give to the girls what I want to if I'm fatigued or not mentally with it, you know? So.
Oh, that's so important, isn't it? And that, would you say that's the catch up? Like, it's kind of like, yeah, you can give everything to your children, but there is a flip side. And
I think so. Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're not there yet. But
I know.
You've found some outlets, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What about you, Ellie?
My husband and I work very much as a fantastic team in this journey together. With Frankie, I invested all my time into him. And again, like Britt was saying, I felt very guilty giving him to someone else to look after for half an hour so I could do something for myself. But I realized probably at about maybe 4 or 5 months in that I was not being the best mother or wife because I wasn't giving any time to myself. And that was prior to falling pregnant. I was very much into the gym, and that was my life. I was in the gym every day, twice a day. Wow. And that was my self-care. So I just needed to have that time to go back to the gym, you know, for an hour a day if I could, and get those endorphins running. And then I came home and I'd be a much better mother and wife. So I knew the second time round that as soon as I had Sully and I could get back to the gym, I just needed to do it straight away. In saying that, I was at the gym with both boys until 2 weeks before I had them. So I didn't really have a big gap off the gym. But even that time, I knew I needed to get back.
Yeah. And so you've both spoken about guilt. the mum guilt thing
Oh,
that we all have. Why do you think, what's your take on this mum guilt? You know, do you, like Ellie, you said your mum was a stay-at-home mum.
yes.
Brit, was your mum?
In the initial years, and then not so much, later on.
Yeah. But those kind
Yeah.
of formative years, that's
Yeah,
kind of your memories around
definitely. Yeah.
And so, see, I always had a working mum, so
Yeah, right.
kind of like a different dynamic, isn't it? So the guilt I don't feel when I leave him with somebody else. I don't know. Maybe I need to go work on that. But where do you think the guilt comes from for you? And how do you resolve it within yourself? Because, ultimately they are going to have to step outside of just your care at some point.
Yeah, look, I think, as I say, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself because I feel like they're my responsibility. And I think, that's just something that I'm going to have to learn to work through, and kind of work out, where my limit is, or do you know what I mean? Or even ease myself into letting go of them a little bit more. I think my family is very close too. And so, like my parents are always over here visiting the girls. And, I think that I just feel like that's what I need to give the girls. Like I'm very close to my parents, and I feel like that's kind of how I want the girls to see me and my husband, is that we're a close-knit family. And the more time I'm with them, the more time I feel like I can give them. So, yeah, but I think, definitely. I think I definitely feel mum guilt leaving them. And pretty much everything I do, I'm like, okay, well, how's this going to affect the girls? Or, what are we going to do with the girls? Or so I think as they get older, I certainly feel less of that guilt towards leaving them. But certainly in those initial kind of months and year or so, I feel like I just need to be there for them.
Yeah, cool. What about you, Ellie?
Yeah, like Britt said, I feel that I'm their mother, so I have the full responsibility of them, and I am, I need to bring them up into this world how they should be brought up. So I do have a lot of trouble letting go and letting other people look after them. I always, if they're ever at someone's house, and that's just my parents or my husband's parents, I'm constantly messaging, seeing how they are, if they're okay, always wanting to see a photo of them. So I'm probably that crazy mum that, wants her children to stay at home until they're 30. And I just don't think I can let go, because I just know how short these years can and how quickly these years go. And I just want to treasure every moment with them, that I don't want to be away. And I just feel guilty that if I do something for myself, then I'm going to miss something.
Yeah.
And that I just want to be the best mother for them, and I want them to know that I did everything for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, so do you think that you both have the same values, and that's what makes you so close?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I also think, I think we have very similar values. Like our lives are so similar. Like both our husbands are teachers. Like we just have so many similarities that I think it's just so easy for us to connect that way.
It's like you were twins.
Yeah, pretty much.
And you married twins that do the same.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the foundation of a really solid friendship or a relationship. Would you agree? It's like having similar values. And so with the partners that you've chosen, subconsciously or consciously, how adult were you when you chose them? Depends on how conscious it was, I'm sure. Did you always have these really strong family values together? Like that was kind of your plan, that, you know, you knew that you were going to have children and you wanted to have multiple children, and Ellie, you were saying you knew when you were going to have them, and like, you know, is that like, yeah, are they similar in that sort of dynamic with you, or are they opposites? Like, how does that work?
No, my husband's definitely very similar. Like, you know, we were set up, and so we went on our first date, and like we were engaged like at the year mark, and then married within 2 years, and then we knew that, you know, we'd wait a year, and then that's when we'd have, you know, our first child, and so that we've always been on the same page.
Wow. Ellie?
Yeah, I'd say the same with my husband and I. We knew once we met. I sort of never believed in love at first sight, but as corny as it sounds, I saw him and I'm like, yep, you're the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And how am I going to get you?
How did you get him, Ellie?
Well, it was more like he was asking me on dates all the time, and I kept saying, I'm working. And then finally I said to him, do you want to go out? And he's like, oh, if you didn't ask, I would have just cut you off, because I just kept thinking you were, you know, flicking me to the side. And then once we started dating and living together, he said to me, oh, I realized that you weren't lying because you're always at work. And I'm like, yes, that's right. So we sort of knew once prior to getting married, we had talked about having children. And I think it's helped, as, you know, marrying a teacher. They obviously love children because they wouldn't be a teacher if they didn't. So it was easy for us to know that once we were married and settled, we were going to start trying for family.
I love that you very adult-like had some good, strong conversations about your needs and desires and values. Like, I know, like, it sounds like duh, but I know that a lot of people don't do that. Like, a lot of people just kind of float along and things happen. So I think, yeah, it makes sense that you both have found each other and have these ways of looking at the world. And do you think your work in Nicu has kind of, at any point did you feel like, oh my gosh, maybe I don't want kids, like this is really tough, or did it just kind of strengthen your love for it?
No, I think it strengthened it. I don't feel, I mean, working in NICU made me worry a lot more about, you know, when I was pregnant, what would happen. But it never kind of turned me off.
Yeah, that's the same for me. There's never any doubt that I was never going to have children. That was, you know, I was going to have children no matter what. And I think, though, since becoming a mother, I have become a more compassionate NICU nurse, because prior to having children, you don't really know what it's like to be a mother. And, you know, when your child is so vulnerable in the NICU, you don't experience that. But once you have your own child and you see them in pain and you can't help them, I then go back to work and I see these parents that we say, you know, you can't hold your baby, you can't touch your baby, you know, your baby could only have a few days to live, this and that. Your heart breaks for them because that's their child and you would never want that to be your child. So I have become, yes, a lot more compassionate since having children and then going back to work.
And do you feel like you can connect better with the parents?
Yeah, I feel like I totally understand their grief more now. You know, I have never been through grief like they are going through, but I can connect with them a lot easier than I did prior to having children. I just think that once you become a mother, I don't know, it's just something that you have to experience to know what other mothers are going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to ask, what sort of advice would you give to, because there's you know, women that are potentially going through this journey right now, with babies in Nicu or are on bed rest. I know I work with women at the Mater that are on bed rest waiting to have their baby. Like what sort of things do you feel are really helpful that you've learned through your work that you could say or help support them just to feel a bit more comfortable with the journey that they're on?
I very much try and encourage the parents to document the journey, write a journal, write letters to their baby. Sometimes if parents have journals in the nursery, I will write a letter from the baby to the mum and dad about how the day has been. And it's nice to see when the parents come in and they've got that letter, how much joy it brings that their baby wrote them a letter last night. We take lots of photos. But the biggest thing is, take every day as it comes. There's going to be some hard days, but there's also going to be some fantastic days. And there's so many milestones that you are going to see along the way. We say to parents that, it's unfortunate that your baby has come preterm, but now you get to go on this journey with them and see them progressing and growing into a baby instead of being inside you. But it definitely is hard. And it's, some people do find it easy and it doesn't really bother them too much, but majority of the parents struggle with it. We just have to be there to support them all the time. And I say that they need to be as hands-on as they can be. So lots of parents might get to day 20 and they've never done a nappy because they don't want to touch their little baby, but they don't know that these babies are so hardy. They're out at 24, 25 weeks fighting for their life. You can do a nappy change and lift their legs up. That's okay. It's not going to hurt them. That's a big fear for those parents. But once they start doing these things, you see that, the glow in their eyes, and they have joy coming in and doing the activities instead of just sitting at the cot staring at their baby behind a Perspex wall.
Yeah, I love that idea of journaling with your baby. And I was just even thinking of mums on bed rest that haven't had their baby yet, journaling to them, like writing letters to the inside, because it's like we're all energy, right? So, and
it's that story that they're going to have forever. If their baby comes at term, then that's something they can look back at. And when their child's older, preterm, even if some, the sad cases where their baby might pass away, that at least they've got some memory that they can have forever about their journey, that one day they can look back on and they might treasure.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Did you guys write your birth story down?
Yeah, I did. I've got journals for both the girls, and each stage of the pregnancy I'd write a little message or kind of recap on what had been happening, and then definitely wrote birth stories. But my husband and I are also very big at journaling as well. Like, my husband often will write me like love letters, and so we've started now a book where we just occasionally we write a letter to the girls in a book that we'll give them when they're older. So yeah, I agree. I think it's a really important part of the process, just to even look back on, like a lot of the little things are the things that you often forget, but they're often the most important things along the way. So
yeah, and you do forget. Like as much as you think, I will never forget my birth.
No, you do.
You will.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I that was a thing I did as well. I wrote it down like maybe a week after or something, just because I'm going to forget so many of these details, and I don't even know if I can look at it right now yet. But like one day, I think that's a really important thing. Another thing I remember, a friend of mine said to me, have a different soap for first shower after you have a baby. And then if you have another baby, have a different soap.
So you have a similar.
Yeah. And when I go back and smell that soap, like it takes me straight back to that moment. And so like just those little reminders are really helpful for us went long after the memories kind of gone off us.
Yeah.
That's so good. And like, I've met you guys because you've come and made earrings, so you do find self-care.
Yeah, we do.
And I just think it's so nice to be able to hear your story, and the fact that you are really embracing motherhood. I think you sound like very balanced adults. And that's a beautiful place to be in. I was wondering, to finish off, are there any tools, resources, books, podcast stories, whatever, that you've kind of found on your journey, either leading up to birth or in motherhood now, that you think have been really supportive and that other people should know about?
I mean, for us, pretty much it's each other. Like, we've literally just had each other every step of the way. I do, and again, I think having family and friend support is a really big thing. I feel like, even in the nursery, we see it all the time. And, especially at the moment, because, like, we're not allowed to have extra people in the hospital for visiting and stuff like that. So these parents, when they come in, are literally here, by themselves. Like, and I just think, like, if that was me, I just would want, my mum or someone else with me. And I think it just, it shows how important it is to have that support network behind you. And I think that's something you really need to work on, before you have a baby. You need to kind of work out, okay, who's got my back? Who can I call on? You really need to kind of nut down who your support group is going to be, because I think that's really important in those first kind of couple of weeks. And I think surrounding yourself with people who are going through a similar situation. So, like Ellie and I, we did a mums group together, and we still talk to some of the mums from that group. And I think, again, it's because you're in that similar situation, and so you feel like you can relate to each other a lot more. And like, you can ask questions. You can say, look, my baby's doing this, is anyone else is doing it? And so, and often then the other mums are like, yeah, we went through that last week and this is what kind of helped us. So I really do think that support network is probably the best thing that you can kind of work on.
I love that you said, building that support network before you have the baby.
Yeah.
Because I've got a lot of mums in my groups who have moved here from different countries and without parents, and so really struggle. And it's like, actually, can we preempt the village?
Yeah, I think so.
Can we be
and we see it in the nursery too, like, these mums all come in from wherever and they're going through the same situation, and they often come out all as friends, like, they end up all communicating together in the rooms. They'll have a chat and they'll compare their days, or they'll talk about what's happening or whatever. And then, quite often, we see them leaving and they're like, oh, hey, here's my number, here's my Facebook, whatever, let's connect. And, again, they're going to be following very similar journeys once they leave the hospital. So it's nice to just kind of have that, have that support network to kind of, again, like, just chat about what's happening.
You need a pregnancy buddy.
Yeah.
Like you guys have. What about you?
You need it.
I think one of the biggest things I didn't mention before is that people hype up pregnancy and motherhood a lot and say how wonderful it is most of the time, but they also forget to say how isolating it can be. If I didn't have Brit, I probably wouldn't have had any support from friends, because I lost a lot of school friends once I had my baby. They weren't at the same stage in life as me. They didn't have partners. They weren't wanting to have children. They were still out partying. So I lost those friends. And, luckily I had Brit's friendship. But besides that, you don't, once everyone comes over and sees a new baby, then they disappear and you don't see them again. So I think that was the big learning curve for me, is that once they come and say hello, you might not hear from them again. And I think when I had Sully, I was very fine about that happening because I'd been through it the first time. But I didn't want other mothers to go through the same thing, and I wanted them to know that this is reality. Like, you're going to be isolated from your friends, and you'll find out who your true friends are. So because of that, I knew a few girls who were pregnant around the same time, having their first baby. So I started a mothers group with Brit, so that these mums could all come together once a week, and just have that little tribe, I guess, for them. And, that started back in February, and we're still seeing each other every week now. And it's been great. Now our children have all these friends to grow up with.
Connect.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be a bit of a theme with the mums that I talk to. It's like, actually, out of all the resources and tools and books, connection has been the most powerful.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people will tell you, read this book, do this, do that. And, I remember being pregnant for the first time. I was thinking, oh, yeah, I'll, read this book, or, I'll sleep train, or I'll do this or do that. And you have all these, you kind of have all these expectations. And in the end, it doesn't really even matter. And, what I found, like my daughter, Audrey, she was terrible at sleeping. Like, we tried every trick under the sun. And, people kept saying, oh, read this book, do this, do that. And I found that a lot of the books and everything, it was so like structured that it kind of heightened my anxiety, because I was like, okay, well, she's not doing that. So what am I supposed to do? So in the end, once I kind of just accepted it for what it was, it actually was less stressful for me, because I was like, well, this is what's happening. We just kind of deal with it. So I think you really kind of need to be careful how much kind of information you take on until you're kind of in there, I guess, and you work out kind of what's going to work for you and what's going to work for your baby, really. And again, we see that a lot in the nursery, like we have, like so many of us nurses work there, and we all kind of have little ways that we do things differently. And, we see women that go, I'm just so confused because someone does it this way, someone does it that way, and I just say to them, look, we're all going to have different ways. That's just part of it. But you kind of need to really work out what you like and what's going to work best for your baby. And then you just kind of take it from there, really. So I think, you just kind of have to, you get your information and make a judgment from there, I guess.
That's interesting. And finally, because I'm all about astrology, what's your star sign, Britt?
Scorpio.
Ellie, what's your star sign?
Capricorn.
Oh, a water and an earth. That's a nice match. And it makes sense, Ellie, because you're like, Brit was really grounding for me. I feel like I could totally talk to her. Otherwise, I'd be, kind of all over the place. And that's the Scorpio, the emotional. No, wait, now I'm confused. So sorry, Brit, you're Scorpio.
Yeah, I am.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So you're the depth. And
yeah.
then you've got the earth, and together that's a really nice match. I think I'm gonna do that from now on. I'm gonna say to people, what's your star sign?
You can give us a reading.
I'm learning. One day I'll be able to, but for now, I just like to see how the different mixes of energy
judge people by their star sign.
There's no judgment. I'm a Scorpio as well. Weird. But anyway, it's been so lovely to speak to you both, and I'm really grateful that you've sat down and shared your story with me and with so many other women that are going to get a lot out of this. So appreciate it.
No, thank you for having us. It's been really fun chatting.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's, I'm always happy to have a chat to you, Carly.
I'm always happy.
And we're always happy to share information too, as we say, once you've been through it, it's very different. And I think, trying to get that message out there and just know that, there's always support wherever you go is kind of, good.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, with your acceptance, acceptance is the key to all things.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just need to be heard. We just literally need to say, sleep is hard, I can't do it. And someone else go, you know what? I heard you. And
I feel your pain.
Yeah. And now
no judging. No judging. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And I am certain that we will connect again very soon.
Thank you.